This is Sky News at 12, the headlines. Labour hits back after long-serving MP Dame Margaret Hodge tells Sky News of a growing hostile environment for Jews.
I kept thinking, what did it feel like to be a Jew in Germany in the 30s? Because it felt almost as if they were coming for me.
Also today, more than 160 people die in floods in Kerala in India. 4 teenagers are stabbed in South London. One is seriously injured. We're live in Genoa as recovery work continues on the collapsed bridge, and the government orders a company which runs it to pay to rebuild it. MPs call for vaping rules to be relaxed, but critics say the long-term effects still aren't known. Paying respect to the Queen of Soul, we have a special report as Detroit remembers Aretha Franklin.
It feel like you lost a loved one when you lose people like that.
If your sister can do it, you can do it too. R-E-S-P-C-T.
Very good morning to you. Labour has accused long-serving MP Dame Margaret Hodge of being disconnected with reality after she compared the anti-Semitism row engulfing the party with Nazi Germany. Last month, Dame Margaret faced disciplinary action after being involved in a row with the party leader Jeremy Corbyn. And now, in an exclusive interview with our deputy political editor Beth Rigby, she's expressed her concerns and the fears that she felt.
For Dame Margaret Hodge, Labour's anti-Semitism row is personal. But the row over anti-Semitism in Labour has become a lightning rod between pro- and anti-Corbyn factions. And this latest war of words suggests peace is some way off. Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Well, our political correspondent Tom Rayner is in Westminster for us now. Tom, what's next for Jeremy Corbyn then?
Well, as you heard in Beth Rigby's report there, the Parliamentary Labour Party will vote on whether or not it wants to adopt the whole anti-Semitism definition provided. So it is really extremely febrile still, online and in reality in the Labour Party, over this really burning issue.
Hey, Tom, thank you. More than 160 people have died in floods in India. More than 200,000 people have been forced into relief camps in the southern state of Kerala. And more heavy rain is expected to push water levels even higher. Well, our reporter Neville Lazarus is in Delhi for us. What's the situation like there at the moment, Neville?
Well, it's been one of the worst floods they've had in a century. 167 people have died in the last 10 days. Relief is going to take place for most of the people who are in the remotest parts of the state.
OK, Neville, thank you. Well, let's stay in India and take you to Delhi now, where the funeral's taking place for the country's former Prime Minister, Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Now, the 93-year-old died yesterday in hospital. His body has been taken to headquarters of his Hindu Nationalist Party before it's cremated. And we've seen ceremonies going through the streets, the cortege weaving through, and flowers and petals being thrown at his state funeral. And you can see the pictures on the screen at the moment as thousands of people have turned out to pay tribute. 6 men have been arrested after 4 teenage boys were stabbed in Camberwell in South London. It's the latest in a series of stabbings in the area. The teenage boys were stabbed on the Elmington estate in Camberwell yesterday evening. On the 2nd of August, drill music artist Sadiq Karama was stabbed to death on Warham Street, where earlier in the year, 18-year-old Raheem Ainsworth Barton was shot and killed. At the end of July, 18-year-old Latwan Griffiths, another well-known drill artist, was stabbed on Denmark Street and later died in hospital. On the 12th of July, Katerina Makanova was found with stab wounds less than a mile from Denmark Road in a block of flats on Brisbane Street. Residents tried to save her, but she later died. Now, on the 13th of May, Jerry Gaffney was stabbed repeatedly on Vassal Road. He was taken to hospital, but died the following day. The violence across Camberwell in the last few months has left residents concerned about the growing violence on their doorsteps. Well, joining me now, live from Camberwell, is Sky's Phil Edwards. And Phil, this seems to be an issue that's just not going away. The number of stabbings seriously increased in recent months.
Yeah, sadly, this scene behind me, Rebecca, is an all-too familiar one. Detectives from the Metropolitan Police investigating another case of knife crime. This to cry out help as he was being attacked, Rebecca. This is a crime epidemic that shows no signs of coming to an end.
Indeed, Phil, thank you. Italy's government has demanded that the company which ran the collapsed bridge in Genoa pay to rebuild it. 38 people have now been confirmed dead, but 20 more still could be missing. The Sky's Caterina Vitozzi is in Genoa this morning. And Caterina, the rescue effort still going on there a number of days on.
Yes, and it has changed somewhat today, Rebecca. For the first time, we've been watching fire crews at work on top of the bridge, deciding they want to honour the victims of this a bit more privately. So those funerals taking place this afternoon.
Caterina, thank you. And join us tonight for a special report on how the bridge disaster has unfolded over the last few days. That's Disaster on the Bridge tonight, 7:30 and 9:30, here on Sky News. Returning now to a reaction to the comments made by Dame Margaret Hodge in an exclusive interview with Sky News. The former Cabinet Minister faced disciplinary action for calling Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn an anti-Semite and says it felt almost as if they were coming for me. Labour has said Dame Margaret Hodge is disconnected from reality. Some reaction on this. Let's bring in political consultant Matthew Doyle. Good afternoon to you, Matthew. What's your reaction to Dame Margaret Hodge's comments today, then?
Well, I think they're a totally understandable reaction to the unnecessary process that she was put through. Throughout this, we've seen a series of, frankly, self-inflicted wounds by the Labour Party on themselves, from their inability to adopt the international definition on anti-Semitism, through to this unnecessary disciplinary process, through to the inability to get the story straight on what actually happened at that now infamous wreath-laying ceremony. And it's been, I think, a very depressing affair for all of us to watch.
Well, the anti-Semitism row, it is causing a bit of a stir, not just on social media, but further afield as well, isn't it?
For sure, and I think that what matters in all of this is recognising that the Labour Party has to listen to what the Jewish community has been saying on this and take their concerns seriously. And throughout this, it would have been perfectly possible to do that if there had been a simple agreement from the start to go with this internationally recognised definition of anti-Semitism, to go with that definition, to go with the examples that have been accepted by so many other organisations and bodies. But instead, for some reason, the Labour Party felt the need to get into this row with the Jewish community, totally unnecessarily, I would argue, about this definition. It is perfectly possible to campaign for the dignity and justice of Palestinian statehood without that being in contradiction, to the text of this definition.
And how damaging is it, do you think, having veteran MPs like Dame Margaret Hodge come out and speak, very strongly to the leader of the Labour Party? How damaging is that for Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, I think what's damaging, as I say, is for the Labour Party not just refusing to listen to Margaret Hodge on this, but to listen to the Jewish community more broadly. You saw an unprecedented number of rabbis of different denominations. You saw the Parliamentary Labour Party, you saw Jewish community groups, you saw the Jewish Labour movement, which is within the Labour Party itself, come together and urge the Labour Party not to engage in this course of action that it has chosen to do. Now, hopefully, Len McCluskey's article yesterday, even in its sort of somewhat grumpy tones, is an indication that the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party is now going to take the right step, and the step that frankly should have been done from the start, which is to go for the full definition and all of the examples, because, as I say, they do nothing to stop the Labour Party's ability to campaign for what it should be doing, which is campaigning for the dignity and justice of a Palestinian state.
Do you think Jeremy Corbyn can survive this?
Yes, I think Jeremy's position is perfectly secure. He's going to lead the Labour Party into the next election. I don't think that's what this is about at all. What it is about is these unnecessary rows that he seems to be unable to avoid getting himself into. And it's partly, unfortunately, a symptom of the foreign policy that he followed for so many years, which had this sort of crude anti-imperialism at the heart of it that meant that however good the intentions were, there were some very bad judgments made along the way in terms of the people of whether it relates to the Middle East or whether it relates to the debate about the future of Ireland, where he was willing to engage in, frankly, sloppy language or share platforms with people that he shouldn't have done so.
And of course it was last week, I mean, you mentioned the wreath row earlier, you know, the fact that Jeremy Corbyn was pictured laying this wreath at a Tunisian cemetery, and now he's gone to the press regulator saying these stories have misrepresented him. Good or bad move?
Well, I think the only thing that has been the misrepresentation here is of the reality of what actually happened. You saw Labour surrogates, the Labour press office, the leader's office themselves, Jeremy Corbyn himself, unable to agree as to what actually did or didn't happen at this event. And let's not forget, this is not a new story. This is a story that has been around before. So the allegations that were in the Daily Mail were something that the leader's office should have been perfectly ready to deal with, respond to, and have a straight answer to. The only reason why it rumbled on for as many days as it did was because of the appalling media handling of it and the ability of the Labour leader's office to get their story straight as to what actually did or didn't happen. But, you know, ultimately that's not the most important thing in all of this, the media handling of one story. What matters, as I say, is the way in which the Labour Party has got itself in this appalling position where the Jewish community has spoken out in the way that it has, and it ultimately undermines the thing that we all care about within the Labour Party, and that is campaigning for the dignity and justice of a Palestinian state, which is what we should be focusing on, and the issues that we should be talking about. For example, the proposed village demolitions that there are going on within the Middle East at this very time, and yet we're debating this this debate about anti-Semitism in a totally self-inflicted and unnecessary way.
OK, Matthew Doyle, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up in the sport.
Yes, thanks very much. We'll have the latest on Kevin De Bruyne's injury at Manchester City and...
Welcome back. Let's get a check now on all the latest sport with Gavin.
See you at the top.
This sports bulletin is brought to you by Vitality, for life insurance that rewards healthy living.
Thanks very much, Rebecca. Breaking news in the last half hour. Manchester City midfielder Kevin De Bruyne will be out for 3 months with any hole-in-ones. There's more live now on Sky Sports News. We're back in the next hour. We'll see you then.
For life insurance that rewards healthy living. Vitality.
Time now to get a check on all the latest weather.
By the springtime flowers of a mountain lake, to the first snowfall on a winter's day.
Well, there's a real mix of weather for the weekend. Northern parts will become windy, whilst rain will set in over central parts. In the south and the east, it will become increasingly warm and humid. The afternoon, the rain over Ireland, western Scotland, northern England and Wales will turn heavy at times, with over an inch of rainfall expected over parts of Cumbria. The winds will freshen too, with gusts of 40 to 50 miles an hour in parts of the north and east. The best of any brightness will be in the south, where temperatures will reach 23 degrees Celsius.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up, why some MPs want more relaxed laws for e-cigarettes. You're watching Sky News. The top stories this hour. Labour has accused long-serving MP Dame Margaret Hodge of being disconnected with reality after she compared the anti-Semitism row engulfing the party with Nazi Germany. More than 160 people have been killed in floods in Kerala in India. Italy's government has ordered the company which ran the collapsed bridge in Genoa to build a replacement and to pay for it. For many, e-cigarettes have proved a helpful aid to quit smoking, so much so that a group of MPs now wants the products to be more freely advertised and taxed less. But with little research into the possible health impact of vaping, is it right to encourage more people to take them up? Sky's Lorna Shattuck has this report.
For 3 years now, Lauren's been selling e-cigarettes and vaping liquids here in South London. Acceptable face of nicotine. Lorna Shattuck, Sky News.
Well, joining us from Birmingham is Dr. Drew Preece, one of the authors of the study and clinician scientist at University Hospitals Birmingham. Good afternoon to you. We heard some of the detail in Lorna's report there. Just talk us through, why do you think that, the NHS should be making more use of e-cigarettes with people who are trying to give up smoking?
So, I think what we're saying is that we're not saying that there isn't a role for e-cigarettes in smoking cessation, but the report suggests that the safety of them is much has been overstated really, and it's 95% safer than smoking is an arbitrary number really, and it's based on very weak evidence and from guesstimates really. And our research that was supported by the Lung Foundation, British Lung Foundation, suggests that actually in healthy human immune cells, that exposing them to this vapor from e-cigarette liquid causes harm. It causes similar harm that we would see in patients that are smoking if we were to take those cells. So I think the jury is out, and I think these recommendations are a little bit premature before we've done all the right research, really.
It's interesting that you're based in Birmingham, because I think it was just a couple of days ago, that Birmingham University published some research saying that actually e-cigarettes are a lot more harmful than perhaps people realise. Do you think that's the case? Can it cause lung disease?
Yeah, so absolutely, and actually this is from our group. So this is a research that I'm talking about that we published earlier on in the week, which just by chance happens to coincide with this. And yes, the evidence that we have is that on lung cells and that there is potential harm, that it causes an inflammation within the lungs that's similar to smokers. And this is independent of the vaping process. It's the nicotine as well. So, what we don't know is that what effect does the actual vaping process have? And what we found is that there may be similar effects to people who smoke.
When you look at smoking and how dangerous we now know that it is, surely it has to be a positive thing if there's something that can help people out there, as we know that e-cigarettes do, that isn't quite so dangerous. I mean, that's what this report seems to be saying, that it's not as dangerous as smoking.
I don't disagree with the report entirely. I disagree with the strength, the way that it's overstated, really. And I think that's where the danger lies. Saying that they're 95% more safe than cigarettes, we don't know that. And there are alternative methods of giving up smoking. And I think there needs to be a much broader debate on smoking cessation and how we invest in that. And there is evidence that actually contact with healthcare professionals during the smoking cessation period is more likely to lead to abstinence from smoking in the long term. And what we don't know is that people who use this method of giving up smoking, they're actually still using it 2 years down the line. So, you're just moving one addiction to another, really. And I think we just need to have a much better debate on this before we suggest these sort of statements about deregulation and freedom of access and advertising, which I think there is a danger in that.
OK, Drew Preece, thanks for your thoughts. Now, Daniel Pryor is the head of programmes at the think tank, the Adam Smith Institute. Good afternoon to you. Talking on the same subject, we heard from Drew there. He says it's like going from one addiction to another. Do you agree?
No, I don't. I think that today's report is a massive win for public health, and if its recommendations are adopted, then there's going to be an awful lot of lives that are going to be saved. And the key thing in this report that's really impressed me is their willingness to talk about advertising, and specifically letting e-cigarette vendors advertise the fact that Public Health England and the kind of public health consensus in the UK says that e-cigs are at least 95% safer than smoking. And this really, really matters, because from survey evidence, we actually know that an awful lot of smokers aren't aware or don't think that e-cigarettes are any safer than smoking. If you look at the Action on Smoking and Health statistics from last year, this is pretty clear. So it's important to kind of ensure that we inform smokers that this is a viable alternative and encourage them to switch.
Should the government really be wading into this debate, though?
Yeah, I think it should. I think that if they want to save lives and do it in an evidence-based way that kind of looks at harm reduction, then this is a fantastic way of doing that. Right now, there's an awful lot of different regulations, some at the domestic level and some actually at the EU level as well, that restrict smokers' ability to switch to e-cigarettes. They make it less attractive, or in the case of advertising restrictions, they don't let marketers make it more fashionable. For example, I recently did a paper for this at the Adam Smith Institute and looked at how young men are vaping at 3 times the rate of young women. And that's even the case when they smoke at roughly the same rates. So we're looking at kind of changing perceptions around this and encouraging as many smokers as possible to make the switch. And the public health consensus is very clear. Public Health England have come out with this figure of at least 95%. There's some uncertainty, I understand that, but the costs of inaction and not making these kind of liberal measures come into government are far greater than the potential risks.
You mentioned uncertainty there, and there is uncertainty, because just a couple of days ago I was mentioning to Drew, you know, there was this report by Birmingham University saying that actually e-cigarettes are a lot more harmful than people realise.
Well, I think that you have to look at the weight of evidence here, and again, I'm going to keep coming back to it because it's probably the best survey of the evidence we have, but Public Health England in February earlier this year came up with their most recent update and looked at all the evidence that we have on e-cigarettes and what harmful or potentially harmful compounds they produce and the various other potential negative health effects, and they are pretty confident that it's at least 95% safer. So whilst we sometimes see in the media some of these studies like the one from earlier this week where I believe it's the one I'm thinking of, they submerged some lung cells in e-liquid, which I would argue doesn't necessarily translate very well into the actual behaviour of a vapour in real life, but you have to look at the weight of evidence overall, and that's very, very clear indeed.
Well, actually, we've still got Dr. Drew with us, and I think he wants to respond. Drew, you were listening in. What do you make of those comments?
Yeah, so firstly, about the actual research, so it wasn't just e-cigarette liquid. It was we actually did replicate the vaping process, and we've designed and validated that process, so it is actually vaped. And yes, our study is small, but there are other studies out there. And what I'm saying is that I agree with the other gentleman that, you know, that they probably are safer, but they're not safe, and they're not 95% safe. In the same way, he's saying that our studies are not are early phase. Also, the evidence that was given to Public Health England is based on very poor, weak studies that aren't clinically evidence-based in terms of randomised trials. So, you know, we could. But what I'm saying is this is great because it's opened up the debate that we need to have, and we would like, you know, if it is found that e-cigarettes are safe, then we would like that to be used. You know, we want people to smoke. I'm a respiratory consultant, and I want all my patients and people to give up smoking. So, you know, but there needs to be caution about promoting them so dramatically, I think, and that 95% is not correct.
OK, Drew, you're back with us. We'll leave it there and we'll give the final word to Daniel then. I suppose you agree, everyone agrees on one subject at least, as he was saying there, that this opens up the debate.
Yeah, it does, and it's fantastic that we're having this right now. Obviously, vaping and e-cigarettes aren't top of the government's agenda, but I think they should be significantly higher up when there's so much potential to save lives and to prevent unnecessary deaths, and also keep people's enjoyment of nicotine if that's what they want to do as well as adults. So I think it's important that this is starting to be debated. I'm really glad to see this report out today.
OK, Drew, Daniel, thank you for your time. I'm sure it's a debate that will run and run. Now, fans of Aretha Franklin have been gathering in her hometown of Detroit to pay tribute to her. The Queen of Soul died yesterday at the age of 76. From Detroit, Sky's Sally Lockwood sent this report.
Aretha Franklin was the Queen of Soul, indelible impression on generations globally. And it's clear her voice and values will live on. Sally Lockwood, Sky News, Detroit.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up, how £10 million is being invested into 10 of Britain's struggling prisons. £10 million is to be invested into improving 10 of the UK's most struggling prisons. It'll pay for the introduction of body scanners and sniffer dogs capable of detecting certain drugs. Now, it's hoped the fresh investment will help deal with growing substance abuse and violence. As Sky's Joe Tidy now reports.
We've had batches which turn them very violent and they can't remember anything about it. Staff get injured or the prisoners get injured. We've had batches in where they just go unconscious, they vomit, they defecate.
The words of a prison governor. The drug in question, spice. It set a year deadline to see if it's enough to make a difference. Joe Tidy, Sky News.
Well, joining us now from Leeds is Stacey Bell, Team Project Manager at New Wortley Offender Support. Good afternoon to you. Do you think this £10 million is enough? How far will it go?
I think that you would need a little bit more than £10 million because there is a wide spectrum of prisons with training and stuff like that that's going to need to happen in the prisons. So maybe we might need a little bit more.
One of the issues, of course, over recent years is that there's been a reduction in, prison officers. Do you think that is the crux of the problem and that's why there's so much violence in prisons?
Well, there is so much prisoners now in prisons these days, which is overcrowding. So with more prison officers, that means that they can handle and get to challenge more things that are happening on wings and stuff like that.
And how much of an issue do you think drugs are, things like spice?
Well, when I've had people coming out, when they've come to me afterwards upon release, they have told me that, spice is a big issue in there, whereas they've not been addicted to it when they've gone in, and when they've come out, it's a problem there. And obviously with nobody knowing what's in spice, it's not detectable for people to get recovery.
And you obviously deal with offenders and you try and give support. What's the key then to rehabilitation?
Well, a good programme, really, to helping them, to reassure that rehabilitation is, is available for them and for everybody, and basically that we can help with putting them on programmes, such as we're actually going to be running a new mental health awareness programme, which, is 99% of our clients have mental health issues. So putting them on programmes and such like that is really good for them. And I've spoke with a lot of the people that I work with, and they've said that most of the training and stuff that I've put them on has helped them so much.
And do you think there is this cycle of people, coming out of prison, then reoffending, going back in? Does this exist in a really, large scale, in your opinion?
Well, I'll say because of us, fingers crossed that they don't tend to go in. We have actually got only two people have been recalled back to prison, and we've worked with over 150 so far. And there's only been 2 to 3 people that have actually been recalled back into prison that I know of. So, just helping that bit of training when they're out. And most people have found that they don't seem to have a bank account. So by them not having a bank account, which means that they can't access the benefits, which then means that they later go on to obviously do crime so that they can access money. So by just having that little bit of help towards a bank account is a whole different aspect of not having to reoffend to obtain money.
Thank you ever so much for your thoughts, and thank you for talking us through what you do. Appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Now, some of the earliest galaxies to form after the Big Bang have been discovered and are orbiting our Milky Way. 2 clusters of galaxies were found and both thought to be more than 13 billion years old. Well, the team from Durham University say it's a space equivalent to finding the remains of the first people who lived on Earth.
From cool, brisk northern fjords to the warm, tranquil waters of Southeast Asia.
There's a real mix of weather for the weekend, I'm afraid. Northern parts will be mostly windy, whilst rain will set in over central parts, and in the south and the east it will become increasingly warm and humid. This afternoon, the rain over Ireland, West Scotland, northern England and Wales will turn heavy at times, with over an inch of rainfall expected over parts of Cumbria. The winds will freshen too, with gusts of up to 40 or 50 miles an hour in parts of the north and the east. The best of any brightness will be in the south, where temperatures will reach 23 degrees Celsius. Of course, that's the equivalent of 73 degrees Fahrenheit. And later on in the day, skies will clear over northern Scotland with blustery showers following into the far northwest.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.